He slaughtered demons for decades with nothing but a sword bigger than a man and rage that wouldn't die. Then he woke up in Warhammer 40K, where the entire galaxy is one endless demon apocalypse. But what happens when a man who rejects all destiny meets an empire that's built on it, and the demon who destroyed his life follows him there? The void screamed. Reality itself tore open like wet paper, bleeding impossible colors across the ash-gray sky of Forge World Metalis 4. Through that wound in existence, something fell. Not gracefully, not like a meteor with purpose and trajectory, but tumbling, spinning, still locked in combat with shadows that dissolved as they crossed between dimensions. Guts hit the ground with enough force to crack the rockcrete beneath him. His massive sword, the Dragon Slayer, a slab of sharpened iron 7 feet long and as wide as a man's torso, drove into the earth beside him. For 3 seconds, he lay there, chest heaving, trying to understand what just had happened. One moment he'd been fighting apostles in the forest outside Vertanis. The next, falling through nothing and everything at once. He pushed himself up. His left arm, the prosthetic cannon arm, whirred and clicked as servos recalibrated. Around him stretched a hellscape that made even his world look tame. Buildings rose like metal mountains, covered in pipes that leak steam and worse things. The sky churned with chemical clouds, and everywhere, the sound of screaming, human screaming. Guts grabbed the Dragon Slayer and stood, his single eye, the other lost years ago, focused on the source of the noise. 50 yards ahead, a mob of people ran toward him. But something was wrong with them. Their skin bubbled and shifted. Extra mouths opened in their flesh. Bone protruded at wrong angles. Then they moved with horrible purpose toward a group of soldiers in gray uniforms who fired las guns into the corrupted mass. The brand of sacrifice on Guts's neck erupted with pain. That familiar, burning agony that had tormented him since the eclipse. The mark that drew demons to him like blood and water. These weren't his demons, but the brand recognized them all the same. One of the corrupted rushed past the soldier's firing line. It was still mostly human, a woman wearing the tattered remains of worker coveralls. But her face had split open vertically, revealing rows of teeth where her brain should be. She grabbed a young soldier, no older than 20, and those teeth began to close on his head. The Dragon Slayer took her in the midsection. The blade's momentum carried through her body, then through the 2 corrupted behind her, then through the barricade they'd been using for cover. 3 bodies and a ton of scrap metal hit the ground in pieces. The soldiers stared. Even mid-battle, they stared. At the sword, at the man wielding it one-handed, at the impossibility of what they'd just witnessed. Guts didn't wait for thanks. He moved into the mob like a force of nature. The Dragon Slayer sang its song of violence. Each swing ended lives. Each step forward crushed corrupted flesh beneath boots that had walked through 1,000 battlefields. Blood painted the rockcrete in wide arcs. Gore splattered against metal walls. To the Imperial Guard soldiers, it looked like butchery. To Guts, it was Tuesday. The corrupted kept coming. They always did. But there was something different about these. The apostles he fought responded to pain, to fear, to self-preservation instinct. These things felt nothing. They charged into the Dragon Slayer's edge with expressions of religious ecstasy. More kept emerging from the buildings, from the sewers, from doorways that shouldn't connect to anything. Too many. Even for him. The brand flared hotter. Guts's vision blurred at the edges. His body remembered this sensation. When demons gathered in sufficient numbers, when the boundary between worlds grew thin, when something truly terrible prepared to manifest, his hand moved to his neck, feeling the raised scar tissue that formed the brand's symbol. And then the first bullet meant for him whined past his head. Commissar Dren had seen many things in 30 years of Imperial service. He'd watched worlds burn. He'd executed cowards by the dozen. He'd stood firm while Chaos Space Marines carved through his regiment like farming equipment through wheat. But he'd never seen a human being move like this. The warrior stood 8 feet tall, maybe more. Impossible physique, muscles layered on muscles, covered in scars that should have killed any normal man 10 times over. That sword alone weighed more than 2 guardsmen combined. No normal human could lift it. No normal human could swing it with such speed. But the really concerning part was the armor. Black metal plates covered portions of the giant's body, but not standard issue, not Space Marine power armor, not anything in the Imperial catalog. And when the corrupted mob had threatened to overwhelm him, when 50 cultists had surrounded the warrior from all sides, that armor had changed. It had moved, like it was alive, like it was eager. The helmet snapped into place over the warrior's head, a snarling beast's face with a single glowing eye. The armor plates shifted and locked, covering vulnerable points with liquid grace. And the warrior's movements changed. Faster, stronger, more violent. The cultists died in seconds. The warrior tore through them with hands and feet when the sword became inconvenient. Commissar Dren watched a cultist's head get crushed between two plates of that living armor, watched another get literally ripped in half, watched efficiency become artistry, become atrocity. When the last corrupted fell, the warrior stood alone in a circle of corpses 30 feet wide. Blood dripped from every surface of his armor. The Dragon Slayer's blade dripped worse things. And then, with visible effort, the helmet retracted. The armor plates loosened. The beast became a man again. A man who immediately collapsed to one knee, coughing blood. Commissar Dren approached with his bolt pistol drawn and 10 guardsmen covering him from multiple angles. Standard procedure for unknown combatants. Even ones who just saved your position. Identify yourself, Dren commanded in High Gothic. No response. He tried Low Gothic. Nothing. Finally, Standard Imperial Common Tongue. Who are you and what is your purpose on this world? The warrior looked up. One eye, scarred face, an expression of pure, exhausted hatred. When he spoke, his voice sounded like gravel grinding against stone. Where am I? Not the response Dren expected. You stand on Forge World Metalis 4, currently under siege by Chaos cultists who have betrayed the God Emperor's light. I ask again, identify yourself and state your allegiance. I don't know what any of those words mean. The warrior stood slowly, retrieving his massive sword with one hand. The other arm, Dren now noticed, wasn't organic. Some kind of prosthetic, crude compared to Mechanicus work, but functional. Last thing I remember, I was fighting apostles in a forest. Then I was falling. Then I was here. The guardsmen tensed. Fingers moved toward triggers. But Commissar Dren held up a hand. The warrior's confusion seemed genuine. And despite the carnage, despite the brutal efficiency, there was something in that single eye that wasn't chaos taint. Just exhaustion. Just anger older than most planets. You claim no allegiance to the ruinous powers? I don't know what that is. The warrior rolled his shoulders, and Dren heard bones pop back into place. But if you're asking if I'm with them, he gestured to the corpses, then no. I kill things like that. It's what I do. Before Dren could respond, something small and glowing emerged from a pouch on the warrior's belt. The guardsman nearly opened fire before recognizing it as some kind of tiny winged creature. Not quite a cherub. Not quite anything in Imperial records. Oh, good. You're not dead, the creature said in a high-pitched voice. I thought for sure that last fight killed you. Then we fell through whatever that was, and honestly, I'm just happy to be anywhere with ground. Dren's bolt pistol aimed at the creature instantly. Xenos. Wait. The warrior's hand moved, not threatening, just blocking line of sight to the small being. He's with me. Not a threat. All Xenos are threats by definition. But Dren didn't fire. Not yet. The tactical situation was too uncertain. The warrior could carve through his entire squad if provoked. That much was obvious. Better to gather information, wait for reinforcements, make proper decisions rather than emotional ones. An explosion rocked the ground 200 yards east. Then another. Then the distinctive chatter of heavy bolter fire. The cultist attack was spreading. The warrior looked toward the sounds of battle. More of them? Thousands, Dren confirmed. They've taken the governor's fortress. We're falling. Back to establish a defensible perimeter around the forges. He studied the warrior carefully. You fight well. Despite your unknown origins and suspicious nature, we could use someone of your capabilities. I don't join armies. The warrior spat blood. Don't follow orders. Don't pray to your emperor or anyone else. Then what do you fight for? For a long moment, the warrior said nothing. Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear over distant explosions, myself, and the people who can't fight back. Commissar Dren considered this heretical thinking by any standard measure. Individualism was the gateway to corruption. Self-interest was how chaos gained its first foothold. But the tactical reality remained unchanged. They needed every blade they could get. The cultists have civilians in that fortress, Dren said carefully. Workers, children. They're using them for ritual sacrifice to summon something from the warp. Every minute we delay, more innocents die. The warrior's expression didn't change, but his grip on that massive sword tightened. How many cultists? Conservative estimate places their numbers at 5,000. Plus whatever they've already summoned. And your forces? 300 guardsmen, 2 sentinel walkers, 1 Lehman Russ tank with half its ammunition expended. Dren met the warrior's single eye. We'll attack at dawn regardless. But our chances improve significantly with you. The small creature, the Xenos that somehow traveled with this unknown fighter, flew up to whisper something in the warrior's ear. Whatever it said made him grimace. Fine, the warrior said finally. I help you kill whatever's in that fortress. Then you help me figure out where I am and how to leave. Agreed. Commissar Dren extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, the warrior shook it. The grip could have crushed ceramite. I am Commissar Dren of the 47th Metallus Defense Force. Your name? Guts. That's it? Just Guts? It's all you need. The interrogation chamber smelled like blood and incense. Guts sat on a metal chair that groaned under his weight, hands resting on his knees, the Dragon Slayer leaning against the wall behind him. 3 days had passed since the fortress assault. 3 days since he'd carved through 5,000 cultists and whatever bloated horror they'd been trying to birth into reality. The Imperial soldiers had won. Barely. And now someone new wanted to talk. Inquisitor Mordecai entered without ceremony. He was thin, almost skeletal, with cybernetic implants replacing portions of his skull. His left eye glowed a faint red. His right remained human, dark and calculating. He wore black robes covered in purity seals, small strips of paper with prayers written in languages Guts didn't recognize. At his belt hung a plasma pistol and something that looked like a short sword but hummed with contained energy. Guts, Mordecai said, his voice surprisingly soft. No family name. No planet of origin. No Imperial records whatsoever. You simply appeared during a chaos incursion, wielding a weapon that should require power armor to lift, accompanied by a Xenos creature that somehow escaped immediate execution. He sat across from Guts, placing a data slate on the table between them. You are either the luckiest drifter in the galaxy, or something far more interesting. Guts said nothing. He'd learned years ago that silence made people uncomfortable enough to reveal more than questions ever could. Mordecai smiled slightly. I've spent 40 years hunting daemons across a dozen sectors. I've seen things that would drive normal men to madness or suicide. Often both. He leaned forward. That mark on your neck. Show me. It wasn't a request. Guts pulled down the collar of his cloak, revealing the brand of sacrifice. The raised scar tissue formed a symbol that looked almost like the chaos icons he'd seen on the cultists' bodies, but different. Older somehow. More fundamental. The Inquisitors. Human eye widened slightly. His mechanical one whirred as it focused, taking measurements, recording data. Fascinating. This mark acts as a beacon, doesn't it? It draws daemons to you. Since the day I got it. Guts confirmed. And yet you live. Most men marked by chaos die within hours, either consumed by daemons or corrupted into monsters themselves. Mordecai produced a small device, pointing it at the brand. It clicked rapidly, like a Geiger counter measuring radiation. This mark predates any chaos iconography in Imperial records. Where did you get it? Guts thought about the eclipse. About watching everyone he'd ever cared about get torn apart by demons while his closest friend transformed into something divine and terrible. About Casca's screams. About his own helplessness despite all his strength. Someone I trusted betrayed me, he said quietly. Sacrificed everyone I knew to become something more than human. This mark says I belong to those demons, that I'm theirs to hunt, forever. And the ones who marked you? Where are they now? 4 of them are dead. I killed them myself. Guts met Mordecai's gaze. The 5th is still out there. When I find him, I'll kill him too. Silence filled the chamber. Puck, who'd been sitting quietly on Guts's shoulder, shifted nervously. Even the small elf could feel the weight of that statement.
You claim to have killed 4 entities powerful enough to mark you with demonic branding, Mordecai said slowly.
Entities that transcend normal reality. With just that sword? And this? Guts raised his prosthetic arm. The cannon built into it clicked as he cycled the mechanism. And when those aren't enough, this. He gestured to the black armor pieces still attached to his body. It keeps me alive when I should be dead. Makes me stronger. Faster. But it tries to kill me while doing it. Mordecai stood and walked to the room's single window. Outside, servitors and tech priests worked to repair the fortress's damaged infrastructure. Bodies were still being collected from the courtyard where Guts had fought.
I've read the reports from Commissar Dren,
the Inquisitor said. You killed 800 cultists personally. The armor you wear appeared to move on its own, like it was alive. Several guardsmen swear they saw it trying to consume you from within. He turned back. That kind of power always comes with a price. What does your armor demand? My life. My humanity. Every time I use it, I get closer to becoming the thing I'm fighting against. Guts' hand unconsciously moved to his neck, touching the brand. But without it, I'd already be dead 1,000 times over. A weapon that kills its user, Mordecai mused. How appropriate for this galaxy. He returned to his seat. I have a proposition for you, Guts. You clearly have no allegiance to chaos despite your mark. You've demonstrated exceptional combat ability against demonic entities. And most importantly, that brand of yours draws them out, of hiding. You want to use me as bait. I want to offer you employment. Mordecai pulled up a hololithic image from his data slate. It showed a map of Metalis 4 with red markers scattered across its surface. The cultist uprising wasn't spontaneous. Someone or something organized it. Cells remain hidden throughout the forges, waiting for orders to strike. With your brand, we can draw them out, hunt them systematically. End this threat before it spreads to other worlds. And what do I get? Passage off this world when the job is complete. Assistance in understanding this galaxy you've found yourself in. And perhaps, if your story about entities that can mark souls proves true, access to Imperial records on similar phenomena. Mordecai's expression hardened. The galaxy is vast, Guts. If your enemy exists here, you'll need resources to find him. Resources I can provide. Guts looked at Puck, who shrugged his tiny shoulders. No good options, as usual. But at least this option gave to him direction, purpose, a way forward instead of just wandering blind through this nightmare reality. Fine, he said, but I work alone. No babysitters, no handlers. Unacceptable. Mordecai stood. You're too valuable and too dangerous to operate without oversight. You'll be assigned a squad from the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. They're experienced daemon hunters. They'll coordinate with you, provide tactical support, and ensure you don't accidentally doom us all. I said no, and I said unacceptable. The Inquisitor's voice went cold. You're on an Imperial world under Inquisitorial jurisdiction. You can accept my terms, or I can have you executed as a potential chaos threat. Your skills are impressive, but nobody is bulletproof. The Dragon Slayer was 15 feet away. Guts could cross that distance in under a second, cut Mordecai in half before the old man could draw his plasma pistol. But then what? Fight through an entire fortress of Imperial soldiers? To go where? He was trapped on an alien world in an alien reality with no idea how to get home or even if home still existed. How long? Guts asked through clenched teeth. Until the threat is eliminated. Could be weeks. Could be months. Mordecai moved toward the door. The sisters will meet you in the armory at dawn. Try not to terrify them too badly. The door closed with a hydraulic hiss, leaving Guts alone with his thoughts and his elf. Well, Puck said, floating up to eye level. Could be worse. At least they're not trying to kill us immediately. Give it time, Guts muttered. Sister Superior Ophelia had fought daemons for 15 years.
She'd purged 3 separate chaos cults. She'd stood in the presence of greater daemons and survived through faith, bolter rounds, and the Emperor's protection. She considered herself reasonably difficult to unsettle. Then she met Guts. He arrived at the armory exactly at dawn, that massive sword slung across his back like it weighed nothing. Up close, Ophelia could see the details the reports hadn't captured. The prosthetic arm was crude, held together with leather straps and what looked like blacksmith's welding. The armor pieces attached to his body had symbols etched into them, but not chaos symbols. Something older. Something that made her eyes hurt if she looked too long. And that sword. Emperor's Mercy. That sword. It wasn't a weapon. It was a statement. A declaration that subtlety had no place in its wielder's philosophy. "You're the sisters they're saddling me with," Guts said. "Not a question. We're your support squad," Ophelia corrected. Behind her stood 5 more sisters, each armed with bolters and absolute faith. "Inquisitor Mordecai believes your brand will draw out remaining cultists. Our job is to eliminate them when they appear. I don't need support. The reports say you collapsed after the fortress battle, that your armor was literally eating you alive." Ophelia kept her voice level, professional. "You're powerful, but you're not invincible. Accept help or die stupidly. Your choice." Something that might have been respect flickered across Guts's scarred face. "Fine. Stay out of my way and we won't have problems." Their first mission together came that afternoon. Intelligence reported unusual activity in Forge District 7. Workers disappearing, strange sounds from the lower maintenance tunnels. The kind of vague reports that usually meant cultists preparing another ritual. Ophelia's squad moved through the tunnels with practiced efficiency, bolters raised, checking corners, maintaining tactical formation. Guts just walked straight down the middle of the corridor, Dragon Slayer scraping against the ceiling, leaving a trail of sparks. "Stealth isn't really your specialty, is it?" Ophelia asked. "Why bother? They can sense me coming anyway." Guts tapped his neck where the brand sat. "This thing announces me better than any Voxcaster." As if to prove his point, screaming echoed from deeper in the tunnels. Not human screaming. Something worse. The cultists had set up their ritual in a large chamber that once housed coolant pumps for the forge above. Now it housed 30 robed figures, chanting in a language that hurt to hear, standing around a circle drawn in blood. In the center of that circle, something was forming. Not fully manifested yet, but getting closer with each passing second. Reality rippled around it like heat waves, but cold instead of hot. Guts didn't slow down. He hit the cultists like a landslide, the Dragon Slayer taking 3 of them before they even registered his presence. The chanting broke. The partially formed daemon shrieked as its summoning was interrupted. Ophelia's squad opened fire, bolter rounds tearing through cultist flesh. But some of the chanters had mutated beyond humanity. Extra arms grabbed weapons, mouths opened in stomachs to vomit acid. One sprouted wings made of bladed bone. This was why the Imperium needed faith. Because reality itself could betray you. Because your neighbor could wake up one morning with tentacles instead of fingers. Because the universe was fundamentally hostile to human existence, and only the Emperor's light held back the darkness. The winged cultist dove at Sister Camilla. Bone blades extended. Camilla fired her bolter, but the mutant's flesh sealed around the wounds like it was made of liquid. The blades got closer, aiming for her throat. The Dragon Slayer caught the mutant mid-dive. The impact sent it crashing into the tunnel wall with enough force to crack stone. Guts followed up, his prosthetic cannon firing at point-blank range. The explosion painted the wall red. "I said stay out of my way," Guts told Camilla. "Didn't say I'd let you die." The partially summoned daemon finally forced itself fully into reality. It stood 12 feet tall, made of shadows and teeth and too many eyes. Its presence made the air taste like copper and rot. When it spoke, multiple voices, layered over each other. Some male, some female, some neither. Marked 1, it said, focusing on Guts. "The brand of sacrifice burns bright. The God Hand sends their regards." Guts froze. Just for a second, but Ophelia noticed. "You know what that means?" "Yeah." His hand tightened on the Dragon Slayer. "I do." The daemon lunged with impossible speed. Guts met it head-on, blade against claws, human strength against demonic power. They collided in the center of the chamber, and the shockwave knocked everyone else off their feet. Ophelia had fought daemons before, but never like this. Guts wasn't just fighting the daemon, he was trying to destroy it on a fundamental level. Each swing of that massive sword carried rage that went beyond combat, beyond tactics. This was personal. This was revenge on something that wore the shape of his true enemies. The daemon laughed as it fought, dodging some strikes, taking others without apparent damage. "You cannot kill what you do not understand." Marked 1. We are ideas given form, concepts made flesh. Your sword is mighty, but it cuts only meat. Then I'll keep cutting until there's no meat left. The Berserker armor, activated. Ophelia watched in horror as the black plate spread across Guts's body like a living thing, covering him completely, transforming him into something that looked more daemon than man. The helmet formed last, that snarling beast face with its single glowing eye. What happened next wasn't combat, it was butchery. Guts moved faster than anything his size should move, faster than the daemon could react. The Dragon Slayer became a blur of sharpened metal. In 3 seconds, he'd cut the daemon apart 17 times. In 6 seconds, the pieces were too small to maintain cohesion. In 9 seconds, nothing remained but rapidly evaporating ichor. Then, Guts collapsed. The armor retracted slowly, reluctantly, like it wanted to stay active. When it finally pulled back fully, Guts was on his knees, coughing blood. His chest had new bruises, darker than they should be. His breathing came in ragged gasps. Ophelia approached cautiously. What was that thing talking about? The God Hand? The brand of sacrifice? None of your business. Guts tried to stand, and failed. Puck emerged from wherever he'd been hiding during the fight, flying to Guts's shoulder and glowing with soft light. Slowly, visibly, the worst injuries began to heal. "Everything about you is my business now," Ophelia said firmly. "That daemon knew you, knew about your mark. If there's a connection between you and whatever's corrupting this world, I need to know." Guts looked up at her with that single eye, and for just a moment, Ophelia saw past the violence and the rage to something underneath. Something broken that kept moving anyway, because stopping meant dying. "Before I came here," he said quietly, "I lived in a world where 5 beings called themselves the God Hand. They were demons so powerful they might as well have been gods. They manipulated fate itself, creating situations where people would sacrifice everything they loved for power." He touched the brand on his neck. "Someone I trusted more than anyone sacrificed me and everyone I cared about to join them. This mark means I belong to the God Hand. That demons will hunt me until the day I die." "And the 4 you claim to have killed?" "Different demons. Smaller demons. But I killed them anyway." He finally managed to stand, using the Dragon Slayer as a crutch. "The 5th God Hand member is still out there. The one who betrayed me. I'll find him eventually. And when I do, nothing in this galaxy or any other will stop me from cutting him down." Ophelia studied this strange warrior who'd fallen into their reality. He carried trauma that would drive most men to madness or suicide. He fought with a brutality that bordered on heretical. His methods contradicted everything the sororitas taught about faith and righteousness. But when that mutant had attacked, Camilla, he'd saved her without hesitation. When the daemon had threatened them all, he destroyed it at great personal cost. Whatever else he wasn't a monster. Not entirely. "The Emperor teaches that faith is our shield," she said carefully. "That through belief in his protection, we can withstand any horror. You claim to have no faith, so what keeps you going?" Guts wiped blood from his mouth. "Hate," he said simply, "and the knowledge that if I stop fighting, everyone who died because of me died for nothing." Before Ophelia could respond, Mordecai's voice crackled through the Vox system in her helmet. "Sister Superior, report. Did you eliminate the target?" "Target eliminated," she confirmed. "But we have new information." The daemon recognized Guts specifically, mentioned something called the God Hand. A long pause. Then,
Return to base immediately. All of you. We may have a bigger problem than anticipated. As they made their way back through the tunnels, Guts walking, ahead in silence, Ophelia found herself with more questions than answers. This warrior from another reality, marked by demons he claimed to have defied, wielding armor that was slowly killing him, searching for an enemy who might not even exist in this galaxy. The Imperium had protocols for everything, categories for every threat, solutions for every problem. But what protocol existed for a man who'd already rejected destiny itself? The Medicaid chamber smelled like disinfectant and something sweet that made Guts' stomach turn. He sat shirtless on an examination table while a tech priest scanned his injuries with a device that beeped irregularly. Puck floated nearby, providing his healing light, but even the elf's magic couldn't fix everything. Some wounds went deeper than flesh. Sister Superior Ophelia stood by the door, watching. She'd been watching him for 3 weeks now, ever since that first mission. 12 more operations since then. 12 more times Guts had thrown himself at cultists and daemons with that massive sword and that berserker fury. And each time, he'd walked away a little more damaged than before. Your bone density is decreasing, the tech priest announced in a flat mechanical voice. Microfractures throughout your skeletal structure, internal bleeding in your left lung, signs of severe neurological stress. The armor you wear is consuming you from within. Tell me something I don't know, Guts muttered. Ophelia stepped forward. You need to rest. You've been fighting constantly for weeks without proper recovery time. Can't rest. Every day we waste, more people die. Guts pulled his shirt back on, wincing as fabric scraped against fresh bruises. That's how this works. The brand draws demons. I kill demons. Simple. Nothing about you is simple. Ophelia dismissed the tech priest with a gesture. When they were alone, she sat on the examination table beside him. I've been thinking about what you said, about rejecting destiny, about fighting against fate itself. And the Emperor's entire philosophy is built on sacrifice for the greater good, on accepting that individual lives matter less than humanity's survival, on following the path he set for us 10,000 years ago. She looked at her hands, calloused from years of wielding bolters and chainswords. But you reject all of that. You fight for yourself. For revenge. For people who are already dead. Your point? My point is that I'm starting to understand why Inquisitor Mordecai keeps you at arm's length. You're dangerous. Not because of your strength or your mark, but because of what you represent. The idea that someone can choose their own path. That destiny isn't absolute. Ophelia met his single eye. In the Imperium, that kind of thinking is heresy. It undermines everything we believe. Everything we've built our entire civilization on. Guts stood, grabbing the dragon slayer from where it leaned against the wall. Then maybe your civilization is built on lies. Maybe it is. Ophelia's admission surprised them both. But those lies keep humanity alive. They give people hope in a galaxy designed to crush hope. They provide meaning in meaninglessness. She stood as well. The Emperor didn't choose the Golden Throne. He was mortally wounded by his own son, a son who betrayed him and turned to chaos. He's been sitting on that throne for 10,000 years, in constant agony, keeping the Astronomicon lit so humanity can travel between stars. He sacrificed everything because there was no other choice. Something in her words hit harder than Guts expected. A man betrayed by someone he trusted. A sacrifice that never ended. Constant pain for the sake of others. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. This Emperor of yours, Guts said slowly. He's still alive? Still suffering. His body barely functions. His mind operates on levels we can't comprehend. Every day, 1,000 psychers are sacrificed to sustain him. Their souls are fed into the Golden Throne to keep him alive just one more day. Ophelia's voice carried reverence and sorrow in equal measure. He can't move, can't speak normally, can't do anything but sit there and project his will across the galaxy. And he's done this for 10 millennia, without rest, without relief, without hope of ever being free. Guts thought about the eclipse, about watching Casca break under trauma she'd never recover from, about years
spent fighting demons with no end in sight, knowing each battle brought him closer to becoming the monster he hunted. About the berserker armor slowly eating him alive while keeping him alive long enough to fight again. "Sounds like hell," he said. "It is hell, but it's necessary hell. Without the Emperor's sacrifice, humanity would have gone extinct millennia ago." Ophelia moved to the chamber's single window. Outside, workers swarmed over damaged forge structures, repairing, rebuilding, continuing despite everything. That's what faith provides. The strength to endure impossible circumstances. To keep fighting when logic says fighting is pointless. Before Guts could respond, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors. The Vox system crackled to life with Inquisitor Mordecai's voice. "All personnel to battle stations. Major warp signature detected. Multiple contacts inbound." This is not a drill. Guts and Ophelia ran for the ramparts. By the time they arrived, the sky had changed color. Not the normal gray of Metalis 4's polluted atmosphere, but a sick purple that hurt to look at directly. And through that purple, shapes descended. Drop pods, dozens of them, but not Imperial design. These were red and brass, covered in chains and skulls, trailing fire like meteors. They hit the ground in perfect formation around the fortress, each impact creating a crater 10 feet wide. The doors blew open with explosive force. From each pod emerged giants. Space Marines, but twisted, corrupted, transformed into something beyond human. Their armor was red as fresh blood. Chains wrapped around their bodies, some attached to weapons, some apparently decorative, all ending in hooks that dug into their own flesh. Symbols of Khorne, the blood god, covered every surface. World Eaters, the most savage of the Chaos Space Marine legions. Commissar Dren's voice came through the Vox network, trying to maintain calm despite obvious fear. "All units, fall back to secondary defensive positions. Concentrate fire on the traitor Marines. For the Emperor!" Last gunfire erupted from defensive positions. Hundreds of shots converged on the closest World Eater. Most bounced off his corrupted power armor. A few found gaps in the plates, burning through the enhanced flesh beneath. The Space Marine didn't slow down. He charged the defensive line, his chain axe roaring, and tore through 5 guardsmen in as many seconds. More World Eaters followed. 20, 30, 40. Each one worth a dozen normal soldiers. The defensive line collapsed in minutes. Guardsmen fell back in organized retreat, laying suppressing fire, but it barely mattered. The traitor Marines were built for exactly this kind of slaughter. The brand on Guts's neck erupted with pain worse than usual. These weren't daemons, not entirely, but they'd given themselves so completely to chaos that the difference barely mattered. His right hand found the Dragon Slayer's handle, automatically. "Wait." Ophelia grabbed his arm. "You can't fight them alone. Space Marines are enhanced beyond human capability. Their bones are reinforced ceramite. Their muscles are hyperdense tissue. They can survive wounds that would kill you 10 times over." "I've fought worse." "No, you haven't." Her grip tightened. "Listen to me. We need to coordinate with the defensive forces, use our bolters to create openings. Work as a squad, not as lone warriors." Guts looked at her, then at the battle unfolding below. The World Eaters were methodically butchering their way through Imperial forces. Blood painted the rockcrete. Screaming filled the air. Every second of hesitation meant more deaths. He activated the berserker armor. The black plate spread across his body with familiar hunger, covering him completely, transforming him into something the World Eaters might recognize as kindred. The helmet formed last, that beast skull face with its single glowing eye. When he moved, it was with speed that made even Ophelia's enhanced reflexes seem slow. Guts hit the first World Eater like a cannonball. The Dragon Slayer took the traitor Marine in the midsection, where the armor plates joined. The blade carved through corrupted ceramite and enhanced flesh, nearly cutting the Marine in half. Nearly. The World Eater grabbed Guts' sword arm with one hand, his chain axe revving up in the other. They grappled in close combat, superhuman strength against berserker fury. The chain axe gouged chunks from the Dragon Slayer's blade, throwing sparks. Guts' prosthetic cannon fired at point-blank range, the explosion catching them both. When the smoke cleared, the World Eater's chest plate was gone, revealing the mass of scar tissue and surgical enhancements beneath. But he was still moving, still fighting, laughing through a throat full of blood. A second World Eater charged from the side. Guts spun, using the first Marine's body as a shield, then threw the dying traitor at his brother. Both crashed to the ground in a tangle of armor and chains. The Dragon Slayer came down once, twice, 3 times, until neither moved. But there were so many more. Guts fought his way toward the largest concentration of World Eaters, the Berserker armor pushing him faster, harder, beyond normal human limitations. Each step left cracks in the rockcrete. Each swing of his sword shattered bones designed to withstand tank shells. The armor fed on his rage, on his hatred, making him stronger while simultaneously destroying him from within. Ophelia and her sisters provided covering fire from the ramparts, their blessed bolter rounds finding gaps in corrupted armor. But even as Guts carved through traitor Marines, even as Imperial forces rallied around his one-man assault, she could see what it cost him. The Berserker armor was moving wrong, fighting against its own wearer, trying to keep going when the body inside wanted to collapse. Then, the largest drop pod opened. The World Eater, who emerged, stood nearly 9 feet tall, his Terminator armor so covered in chains and skulls that the original color was almost invisible. His axe was twice the size of the ones his brothers carried, its teeth made from some material that reflected light in wrong ways. And when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire battlefield through corrupted Vox systems. "I am Kargoth the Skull-Taker, chosen of Khorne, bearer of 1,000 skulls." He pointed his axe directly at Guts. "You, the Marked One, the God-Slayer. Khorne has sensed your presence, your rage, your endless violence." He began walking forward, each step crushing rubble beneath armored boots. "Join us. Your fury belongs to the Blood God. Stop pretending you fight for anything else." Guts stood among the bodies of 8 World Eaters he'd already killed. The Berserker armor dripped with blood that wasn't entirely his enemy's. His breathing came in ragged gasps that the helmet couldn't hide. But he raised the Dragon Slayer in. "Answer." Kargoth charged. The impact when they met shattered the ground beneath them. Kargoth's axe screamed against the Dragon Slayer, both weapons built to destroy anything they touched. They traded blows with speeds that made them blur, each strike powerful enough to demolish buildings. "You're already one of us," Kargoth roared between swings. "You wear armor that feeds on your suffering. You exist only to kill. Your entire life is violence without purpose or end. What do you fight for if not the glory of combat itself?" The words hit harder than the axe, because part of Guts, the part the Berserker armor amplified, wondered if Kargoth was right. What did he fight for anymore? Casca was broken beyond repair. His companions were dead or scattered. Griffith was untouchable, having ascended to godhood. Every day was just more violence, more blood, more rage without purpose or resolution. The Berserker armor sensed his moment of weakness and pressed harder. The helmet's jaws clamped down on his neck, drawing blood. The gauntlets tightened around his arms, crushing muscle. The armor wanted him to give in, to become nothing but violence incarnate, to surrender his humanity and become the beast it wanted him to be. Through the haze of pain and rage, Guts saw something, a memory. Casca before the eclipse, smiling at him in morning light. Not the broken shell she'd become, but the warrior woman who'd fought beside him, the person he'd promised to protect. His left hand, the prosthetic, moved without conscious thought, found Kargoth's helmet where the gorget joined the skull. The cannon fired directly into the gap at point-blank range. The explosion took Kargoth's head off his shoulders in a spray of bone fragments and ancient blood. The Chaos Lord's body stood for 3 more seconds before collapsing. Guts fell to his knees as the Berserker armor reluctantly retracted. Blood poured from a dozen wounds. His left arm hung useless, servos destroyed. 3 ribs were broken, maybe 4. Internal bleeding painted his vision red around the edges. But he was still human, still himself, still fighting. The remaining World Eaters, leaderless and surrounded, fought with even more savagery. But Imperial forces pressed in from all sides. Within an hour, the last traitor Marine fell. The battle was won. Guts remained on his knees among the corpses, unable to stand, barely able to breathe. Puck flew to him immediately, healing light working overtime on injuries that should have been fatal. Ophelia arrived moments later, her armor scorched and dented but intact. "You're dying," she said simply. "Not yet. The armor is killing you faster each time you use it. At this rate, you have maybe 3 more fights before it consumes you completely." She knelt beside him. "You need to stop. Find another way. Accept help from people who care whether you live or die." Guts looked at the battlefield around them. Hundreds of Imperial soldiers lay dead or dying. The fortress was half destroyed. And somewhere out there, more enemies waited. More demons. More chaos. More endless violence in a galaxy built on suffering. "There is no other way," he said. "This is what I am. What I've always been." Before Ophelia could argue, reality itself screamed. The sky tore open. Not a warp rift this time, but something else. Something older and more terrible. A wound in existence that bled darkness instead of color. And through that wound, Guts felt a presence he recognized on the deepest possible level. The brand on his neck erupted with agony beyond anything he'd experienced in this reality. The pain drove him to his feet, despite his injuries, despite Puck's protests, despite Ophelia trying to hold him down. "No," he whispered. "Not here. Not possible." Through the rift stepped a figure in white armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Wings spread from his back. 6 of them, beautiful and terrible. His face was perfect, inhuman, in its flawlessness. And on his forehead sat a mark that Guts had seen only once before, during the eclipse, when his best friend had transformed into something divine and monstrous. Femto, Griffith, the 5th member of the God Hand, but changed. Merged with something from this reality, empowered by the warp, become something even worse than before. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made reality itself shudder. "Hello, Guts," Femto said. "Did you really think you could escape me by fleeing to another dimension?" Guts grabbed the Dragon Slayer with shaking hands. Every injury, every broken bone, every reason he should collapse and die, all of it became irrelevant. Because here, finally, was the enemy he'd been hunting for years. The man who'd betrayed him. The monster who destroyed everything. "I'm going to kill you," Guts said, his voice raw with hatred older than this galaxy. "I don't care what you've become. I don't care if it kills me. I'm going to cut you down." Femto smiled, still defying destiny, still refusing to accept that everything you've suffered was necessary, that your pain had purpose. He spread his wings wider. "This universe is beautiful, Guts. So much suffering, so much despair. The perfect canvas for my dream." Behind Femto, the rift pulsed with dark energy. Through it, shapes moved. Apostles, demons from their old reality, corrupted further by contact with chaos, becoming hybrids of 2 different hells. Ophelia stood beside Guts, bolter raised, though her hands shook. "What is that thing?" "My destiny," Guts said. "The reason I'll never stop fighting. The demon wearing my best friend's face." Imperial forces were mobilizing, recognizing a new threat. But Guts knew none of them could handle this. Femto was beyond them, beyond their weapons, their faith, their understanding. This was a battle from another reality, and only he could fight it. He activated the Berserker armor one more time, knowing it might be the last. The black plates spread across his broken body, holding shattered bones together, pumping chemicals into destroyed muscles, turning him into a weapon one final time. "Sister Ophelia," he said, his voice distorted by the helmet. "Get your people back. This fight is mine. You'll die. Probably." He started walking toward Femto, each step an act of pure will over a body that wanted nothing but to collapse. "But I'll take him with me." Guts crossed the distance between himself and Femto in 3 seconds. The Dragon Slayer came down with all the force his broken body could generate, aimed at the head of the monster who'd destroyed his life. The blade passed through empty air. Femto stood 10 feet to the left, having moved without appearing to move, reality bending around him like water around a stone. Still so direct, Femto said, his voice carrying that same calm certainty it had always possessed. Still believing that enough violence can solve any problem. You haven't changed at all. Guts. And you're still hiding behind tricks instead of fighting. Guts spun. The Dragon Slayer carving a horizontal arc that should have bisected Femto at the waist. Again. Nothing. The white-armored figure simply existed somewhere else. Untouched, untroubled. Around them, the battlefield had become a frozen tableau. Imperial soldiers stood with weapons raised but not firing, knowing instinctively that this was beyond them. The remaining World Eater corpses littered the ground like broken toys. And through the rift behind Femto, more shapes emerged. Apostles from their old reality, transformed by contact with the warp into something even more nightmarish. Sister Superior Ophelia watched from the ramparts, her bolter aimed at Femto but her finger frozen on the trigger. She'd fought daemons before. She understood chaos corruption. But this entity was something else entirely. It moved wrong, existed wrong, like a glitch in reality itself. And the way Guts fought it, with hatred so pure it was almost holy, told her everything she needed to know about their history. Femto gestured casually, and 3 apostles charged Guts from different angles. These were creatures he recognized from his old life. The Snake Baron, regenerated from wounds that should have killed him permanently. The Count, his armor fused with demonic flesh. And Rosine, the elf child who transformed an entire village into her twisted fairy tail, now sprouted wings that dripped warp energy instead of insect chitin. The berserker armor responded before Guts could think. His body moved with inhuman speed, the Dragon Slayer taking the Snake Baron's head off in one swing. The Count's armored fist caught him in the ribs, cracking what was already broken, but Guts's prosthetic cannon fired directly into the Apostle's face. The explosion sent chunks of corrupted flesh across the battlefield. Rosine dove from above, her claws extended, aiming for his neck. But something intercepted her mid-flight. A bolt round, fired with perfect precision, took her in the chest and detonated. The explosion scattered her across 50 feet of rockcrete. Ophelia lowered her bolter, a prayer on her lips. Around her, the other sisters of battle had opened fire, their blessed ammunition finding the apostles with Emperor-guided accuracy. The creatures were tough, far tougher than normal daemons, but concentrated fire from an entire squad gradually tore at them apart. Your allies show admirable courage, Femto observed, still untouched, still calm, but ultimately futile. This galaxy is already mine, Guts. The warp recognizes me as something new. Something beyond the chaos gods themselves. I've merged with forces your simple mind cannot comprehend. Don't care what you've merged with. Guts charged again, the berserker armor pushing his destroyed body beyond its limits. Don't care what you've become, you're still Griffith, still the traitor who sacrificed everyone for power. And I'm still going to kill you. This time, when the Dragon Slayer swung, Femto didn't dodge. He caught the blade between his palms, stopping 7 feet of sharpened metal with bare hands. The impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield, cracking walls, shattering windows. You cannot kill me, Femto said. You never could. From the moment we met, from the first time you swung a sword in my presence, your fate was sealed. Every choice you made led you here. Every battle, every scar, every moment of suffering, all of it was necessary to forge you into the perfect adversary. He smiled that perfect, terrible smile. You exist only to chase me, Guts. That is your purpose, your destiny. Causality itself demands it. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Because part of Guts, the part that had spent years analyzing the eclipse, the part that had read the prophecy in the Skull Knight's words, knew Femto was right. Everything had led to this. Every coincidence was too perfect. Every escape too convenient. He'd been running in a circle drawn by forces beyond his understanding, and Griffith had been at the center all along. The berserker armor sensed his despair and clamped down harder. The helmet's jaws dug into his neck, drawing blood. The gauntlets crushed his arms, trying to force him to keep fighting, even as his spirit faltered. Pain became the only reality, drowning thought, drowning doubt, leaving only rage. Guts pushed harder, against the Dragon Slayer, trying to force it through Femto's grip. His muscles tore, his bones cracked. The armor held him together through pure malevolence, refusing to let him fall, using his body as a weapon even as it destroyed that body from within. "Let me show you something," Femto said. With a gesture, reality rippled. Images formed in the air around them, visible to everyone on the battlefield. Guts saw himself from an outside perspective. Saw himself fighting, always fighting, covered in blood, surrounded by corpses. Saw the trail of destruction he'd left across multiple realities. Saw that in his quest for revenge, he'd become exactly what he hunted, a monster, a demon, a force of pure violence without purpose or end. "You are as much a monster as I am," Femto continued. "The only difference is that I accepted what I was. I embraced destiny and transcended humanity. You still pretend you're fighting for something noble. But look around you, Guts. How many have died because of your rage? How many worlds have burned because you cannot let go?" Sister Ophelia watched the images with growing horror, not because they showed Guts as a monster, but because they were true. Every corpse, every battlefield, every moment of brutality had happened. But she also saw something the images didn't show. She saw the contexts, the children he'd saved, the innocents he'd protected, the moments where he'd chosen mercy over revenge. "He fights because he has to," she shouted across the battlefield. "Because people like you exist. Because someone has to stand against destiny when destiny is wrong." Femto turned his perfect gaze toward her. "Ah, the faithful warrior. Tell me, sister, does your emperor not embody destiny itself? Does he not demand absolute obedience to a predetermined path? How is your Imperium different from the causality Guts claims to reject?" The question struck at the heart of Ophelia's faith. The emperor did demand obedience. The Imperium was built on the Brind idea that individual choice mattered less than humanity's collective survival. That destiny, in the form of the emperor's vision, superseded personal freedom. But there was a difference. There had to be. "The emperor sacrificed himself for humanity," she said. "Your sacrifice was of others for yourself. That's the difference. That's what makes you a monster." For the first time, something flickered across Femto's perfect face. Not anger, but interest. Fascinating. "This galaxy has taught you to worship suffering as virtue, to see sacrifice as the highest good." He looked back at Guts. "Perhaps that's why you were drawn here, to a universe that validates your endless martyrdom." Guts wasn't listening anymore. The berserker armor had consumed most of his consciousness, leaving only the beast beneath. He tore the Dragon Slayer free from Femto's grip through sheer force, taking skin from the God Hand member's palms. It was the first damage he'd managed to inflict, and he pressed the Feam, advantage with animal fury. The next 30 seconds were chaos. Guts attacked with combinations he'd spent years perfecting, each strike flowing into the next, the Dragon Slayer becoming an extension of his will. Femto dodged most, blocked some, and took a few hits that actually drew blood. White blood, luminescent, wrong. But for each wound Guts inflicted on Femto, the berserker armor inflicted 10 on him. His left arm hung useless now, the prosthetics mechanisms destroyed. His right leg buckled with every step, the knee shattered. Blood poured from his mouth, his nose, his eyes. The armor was literally eating him alive, using his flesh as fuel to continue fighting. Puck flew desperately around the battle, his healing light working overtime, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Guts was dying, and everyone watching knew it. Inquisitor Mordecai arrived at the ramparts, flanked by a squad of Grey Knights who'd teleported in from an orbiting ship. These were the Imperium's daemon. Hunters, warriors trained and equipped specifically to fight warp entities. They took one look at Femto and began their rituals, their force weapons glowing with psychic energy. "That creature is unlike any daemon in Imperial records," Mordecai said quietly. "It exists partially outside reality. Standard banishment won't work." "Then what will?" Ophelia demanded. "I don't know."
But if Guts dies fighting it, we lose our only advantage. That brand of his draws daemons, but it also seems to anchor this entity to physical reality. Mordecai's augmented eye whirred as it analyzed the battlefield. If we can support Guts long enough, perhaps the Grey Knights can complete a modified banishment ritual. He won't accept help. He's too far gone in that armor. Then make him accept it. Mordecai looked at her directly. You're his connection to this reality, his reminder that he's still human. If anyone can reach him, it's you. Ophelia jumped from the ramparts, using her power armor's servos to cushion the 3-story drop. She hit the ground running, Bolter firing at apostles that tried to intercept her. Her sisters provided covering fire from above, their shots perfectly timed to clear her path. She reached Guts as he drove the Dragon Slayer through Femto's chest. The Godhand member looked down at the blade protruding from his body with mild interest, as if observing an unexpected but not unpleasant development. Impressive, Femto said. You've actually damaged me. It will take decades to fully regenerate this wound. He gripped the blade and pulled himself closer along its length, until his face was inches from Guts's helmet. But decades mean nothing to me. I have eternity. What do you have? Guts tried to respond, but only blood came out. The Berserker armor's helmet had clamped down completely, the jaws meeting through his throat. He was drowning in his own blood, while the armor kept his heart beating, kept his lungs gasping, refused to let him die, because dying meant stopping, and the armor existed only to continue. Ophelia grabbed his arm, the one still functional, and pulled him back. The motion broke Femto's grip on the Dragon Slayer, and the blade slid free, trailing that strange white blood. Guts, listen to me, she said urgently. You're dying. The armor is killing you. You have to let it go. The helmet turned toward her, and through its single glowing eye, she saw nothing human. Just rage and pain and desperation. I know you think this is your fight alone, she continued. That accepting help means weakness. That you have to do this yourself, or everyone who died meant nothing. She kept her grip on his arm, feeling the armor trying to shake her off, trying to return to combat. But you're wrong. Fighting alone isn't strength. It's just another way of giving up. Behind them, Femto was regenerating, the wound in his chest closing slowly. More apostles emerged from the rift, a dozen of them, all twisted by warp exposure. The Grey Knights engaged them immediately, their force weapons cutting through demonic flesh with blessed efficiency. The Emperor teaches that sacrifice matters only when it serves a greater purpose, Ophelia said. That dying is easy, but living is hard. That continuing to fight, continuing to believe, continuing to hope, even when hope seems impossible, that's the real test. She pulled harder on Guts's arm. So stop trying to die heroically and start trying to live. Because people need you, not just for revenge, but for protection, for inspiration, for proof that humans can stand against gods and survive. Something in her words penetrated the armor's influence. The helmet's jaws loosened slightly. Blood stopped flowing quite so freely. And for just a moment, Guts was himself again, looking at this woman who'd somehow become his anchor to sanity in a galaxy gone mad. Can't beat him, he said, his voice barely audible. Never could. He's destiny itself. Then change destiny. Ophelia released his arm and raised her bolter toward Femto. The Emperor changed his destiny when he chose the Golden Throne. You can change yours by choosing to live. The Grey Knights had completed their ritual circle, positioning themselves around Femto in a perfect hexagon. Their chant rose in volume, words of power that predated the Imperium itself. The air between them began to shimmer with golden light. Femto noticed and smiled. A banishment ritual. How quaint. But I'm not a demon, little warriors. I'm something far older. I predate your Emperor, your galaxy, your concept of reality itself. But you exist here now, Inquisitor Mordecai said, stepping into the circle. In his hands he held a staff topped with a burning aquila. Which means you're subject to the laws of this reality. And in this reality, the Emperor's will is absolute. The golden light intensified, forming chains that wrapped around Femto's limbs.
The God Hand member struggled, his perfect calm finally cracking. Impossible. Causality cannot be denied. The flow of fate cannot be altered. Watch us, Mordecai said. But the ritual was incomplete. It needed an anchor point. Something to bind Femto to so the Grey Knights could force him back through the rift. And the only thing connected to him strongly enough was the brand on Guts's neck. Guts understood immediately. If they completed the banishment using him as the anchor, he'd be pulled through the rift as well. Back to his own reality or into the warp itself, or simply scattered across dimensions until nothing remained. Either way, it meant death. Or worse. He looked at Ophelia, at her face visible through her helmet's faceplate, at the expression that mixed determination and sorrow. Your choice, she said simply. Die fighting him forever, or die sending him away so others can live. It wasn't really a choice at all. Guts had never been good at choosing himself over others. That was why he'd stayed with the Band of the Hawk despite knowing Griffith's ambition would consume them all. Why he'd tried to save Casca even after she broke. Why he fought demons that would hunt him until his death simply to protect people he'd never met. He deactivated the Berserker armor. The black plates retracted, peeling away from flesh they'd fused with, taking chunks of skin and muscle with them. The pain was beyond description, but it was his pain, his choice, his humanity reclaimed. Do it, he told Mordecai. The Inquisitor nodded once, respectfully, and adjusted the ritual. The golden chains shifted, wrapping around Guts as well as Femto, binding them together like they'd been bound since the eclipse. Femto's eyes widened with genuine surprise. You're choosing death? You're giving up the hunt? After everything you've sacrificed? Not giving up, Guts said, blood flowing freely now without the armor to hold him together. Just changing tactics. If I can't kill you, I'll make sure you can't hurt anyone else. The rift began pulling them, both toward it. Femto fought against the pull, his power immense, but the Grey Knight's combined will was stronger. Inch by inch, they were dragged toward the dimensional wound. Sister Ophelia ran forward, grabbing Guts's hand. Wait. There has to be another way. There isn't. Guts squeezed her hand once. Tell your Emperor thanks for showing me what real sacrifice looks like, and tell Puck to find someone else to heal. Someone who'll listen to him. The elf flew to Guts's shoulder one last time, tears streaming down his tiny face. You stupid human. After everything, after all these years, you're finally going to die doing something noble, instead of just violent. Yeah, Guts said. Funny how things work out. The pull intensified. Femto was almost at the rift now. Still fighting. Still convinced his destiny couldn't end like this. But Guts had stopped fighting. He simply held on, using the last of his strength to ensure Femto couldn't escape, to make certain the monster went back, through that dimensional wound even if it meant going with him. At the very edge, just before they crossed the threshold, Femto looked at Guts with something approaching respect. You actually did it. You changed your destiny. You chose death over revenge. I didn't think you had it in you. Shows what you know, Guts replied. They fell through together, God Hand and Godslayer, locked in embrace, the dimensional rift sealing behind them like a closing wound. The golden light faded. The Grey Knights collapsed from the ritual's strain, and on the battlefield of Metalis IV, silence fell. Sister Superior Ophelia stood where Guts had been moments before, her hand still extended, still feeling the ghost of his grip. Around her, Imperial forces began securing the area, eliminating the last apostles, restoring order to chaos. But she barely noticed. Inquisitor Mordecai approached, his staff still smoking from channeled power. The banishment is complete. Both entities have been expelled from this reality. Are they dead? Unknown. The rift didn't lead to any dimension we recognize. They could be scattered across the warp. They could have returned to their original reality. They could exist in some liminal space between dimensions. He paused. Or Guts could still be out there, hunting that monster across realities like he always has. Ophelia looked up at the sky, now returned to its normal gray. Somewhere beyond those clouds, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the system itself, the galaxy continued. Trillions of humans fought for survival against impossible odds. And somewhere, maybe, a one-eyed warrior with a sword too big for any normal person continued his hunt. He rejected destiny, she said quietly. In a universe built on fate and predetermined paths, he chose his own ending. Perhaps that's what we need more of, Mordecai said. Not blind faith, but conscious choice. Not acceptance of suffering, but defiance against it. He looked at the inquisitorial seal on his staff. Your squad is being reassigned. New mission parameters, new sector, but you'll carry what you learned here. Ophelia nodded. She'd carry more than that. She'd carry the memory of a warrior who'd lost everything but kept fighting anyway, who'd faced gods and refused to kneel, who'd given up revenge, the thing he'd lived for, to protect people he'd only known for weeks. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, one man had proven that humans could still choose their own fate, even if that choice was how they'd die. Puck landed on her shoulder, his glow dimmer than usual. He told me to find someone else to heal, someone who'd listen. You're terrible at listening too, but I guess you'll do. Despite everything, Ophelia smiled. Welcome to the Imperium, little one. We'll teach you about faith, and I'll teach you about hope. Puck replied. Guts would want that. Above them, the stars waited, indifferent to human suffering, uncaring about individual sacrifices. But somewhere in that vast darkness, if the stories were true, the God Emperor watched, and perhaps he recognized a kindred spirit in the warrior who'd given everything to protect others. The hunt was over, or perhaps it had only just begun. In a galaxy where reality itself was fluid, where dimensions overlapped and destiny was written in warp storms, who could say if Guts was truly gone? Warriors like him had a habit of surviving impossible circumstances, of returning when needed most, of defying fate one more time. But that was a story for another day. For now, the Imperium had won. Metalis IV was secure, and Sister Superior Ophelia had learned something that would shape the rest of her life. That faith without choice was just another form of slavery, and that the truest believers were those who chose to believe despite having every reason not to. She turned and walked back toward the fortress, Puck glowing softly on her shoulder. The dragon slayer left planted in the rockcrete where Guts had made his final stand. A monument, a reminder, a symbol of defiance, in a galaxy that demanded submission. And if sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, soldiers on watch reported seeing a one-eyed figure walking the battlements with a sword too large to exist, well, the Imperium had always had room for legends.